Why was this video created? Ever since it was announced that the CLAT PG 2019 will have a subjective part, we have been receiving quite a few queries from our users and from visitors to our website about how do we prepare for the subjective part, what is going to be the syllabus for the subjective part, and what type of questions can we expect. So we thought, let us put together a video which covers all the important and the frequently asked questions about the subjective part of CLAT PG 2019. This is going to be a fairly long video, but we will try to keep it as crisp and to the point as possible. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us at hello@lawment.com, and we will be able to answer your specific queries or doubts. What is the official syllabus for the subjective part of CLAT PG 2019? When the original announcement was released, it was just mentioned that the subjective part would consist of 2 essay type questions of 25 marks each, adding up to 50 marks. Looks like the CLAT help desk received a number of emails and phone calls from students seeking more clarification on the subjective part, and thereafter an additional bit of information has been updated into the official website, which says that these 2 questions will be on the topics of law and contemporary issues. So apart from this, there is no further official information available on the syllabus for the subjective part. However, when we look at the questions that have appeared in the previous CLAT PG exams and also the subjective questions from other exams such as the IELTS PG, and also take into consideration the syllabus for the objective part, we can come to a fair bit of understanding about how the questions for the subjective part will be framed and what kind of questions can you expect. So we will be covering those aspects further down in this video. The subjective part in the CLAT PG exam is not a new animal. In fact, the CLAT PG always had essay type questions right from the time of its inception all the way till 2013. The subjective part was dropped in the CLAT PG only from 2014 till 2018, and it has been reintroduced now in 2019. When we look at a similar exam, which is the IELTS PG, which is conducted by NLU Delhi, the subjective part was always a part of the question paper, and it has been dropped only from 2019 onwards. What we have done is compile a list of the questions that appeared in the subjective part of CLAT PG 2008 till 2013, and also the subjective questions that appeared in IELTS PG from 2015 till 2018, and this list has been updated into our online practice pack. So students can use these questions as indicators to help in their practice, and these questions will also give you a fair understanding of the type of contemporary legal issues that may be used for framing the questions for the subjective part. Why was the subjective part introduced into the CLAT PG? Now, if you look at a typical LLM program, there will be a fair bit of writing that needs to be done. It might be your regular semester exams, your submissions, project work, thesis or dissertation. So what the NLUs would like to assess is the writing skills or the command over language of the prospective students. Now the subjective part can assess your ability to convey your thoughts on paper in a structured, logical and lucid manner. So the subjective part goes beyond evaluating the right and wrong answers. It actually can assess your ability to justify your answers. In other words, while the objective part can show that you know the answer, the subjective part can show that you actually understand the subject. Or if it is a contemporary legal issue, then it shows that you can understand an issue that is being debated in the society at large, and you can form your own opinions and you can convey your thoughts on paper. A question that we have received from some of our users is whether the scores for the objective and subjective parts be indicated separately. Since the evaluation for both these parts will happen separately, there is every possibility that the scores will also be displayed separately in the score sheet or the mark sheet. However, when it comes to the overall ranking for the CLAT PG 2019, we believe that the ranking will be done on the basis of combined scores. However, if any organizations like the PSUs, which use the CLAT PG for evaluating candidates for various roles, or if there are other organizations or other institutions which are using the CLAT PG scores for other purposes, if they wish to get the individual scores or the section-wise scores of candidates, they can do so because the scores will still be recorded separately. However, to summarize, the ranking for the CLAT PG 2019 for admission to the NLUs is most likely to be done on the basis of combined scores from both these sections. Let us briefly touch upon a challenge that is inherent to the subjective part of the CLAT PG 2019, or the subjective part of any exam for that matter. Understanding this challenge is important from a point of view of helping you fine-tune your preparation for the subjective part. Now, the challenge is that the evaluation or the assessment of the subjective part tends to be very subjective, pun intended, and this can be illustrated by looking at a few simple examples. A number of students write their LLB exams, and some of the students will fail in some subjects, and other students are not happy with the marks that they have received, and such students might apply for re-evaluation. When the same answer script is re-evaluated, some of the students might end up passing some of the subjects, and other students may see an increase in their marks. So how does this happen? Now, even though it is the same answer script which is being re-evaluated, the new aspect that is being introduced into the equation is the examiner. When two different people read a subjective answer, there is a high probability that the scores that they award will be different, because there are a number of variables that will be at play when two different individuals are reading the same answer. It might be that the initial examiner might not have had enough time to go through the essay in detail, or he or she might not have been able to connect with the essay or understand the gist of what the candidate is trying to convey, whereas the second examiner might have had enough time to go through the essay in detail and actually understands and agrees what is trying to be conveyed, and therefore awards higher marks. This is very similar to what happens when two different people watch a movie. They might walk out of the theater with a different opinion about how good or bad the movie was. When two people read a newspaper article or a novel, there is a high probability that their opinions will differ in terms of how good or bad it is. In short, 50% of a subjective answer is what you write, and 50% is what the evaluator understands. So what we recommend is don't try to write an ideal essay, because the concept of an ideal essay will change from person to person. Write a standard essay, because irrespective of who's reading the essay, there are a few common minimum requirements that you need to meet, and by meeting those, you are ensuring that you are covering all the important aspects that need to be touched upon in your essay. So follow the suggested best practices and techniques and practice writing a standard essay. What we will be doing is including a small guide in our online practice pack, which summarizes all these best practices and techniques that you should keep in mind while you practice writing essays. And as we will reiterate multiple times in this video, the best way to practice for the subjective part is to write as many essays as possible. And you can use the questions from the previous CLAT PG papers, and also you can use some generic topics to practice writing as many essays as possible. So to summarize this part, Practice writing a standard essay and don't worry about writing an ideal essay. How should I prepare for the subjective part? This is probably the most frequently asked question. Now, officially the subjective part is mentioned as consisting of 2 essay type questions of 25 marks each. And these questions will be on the topics of law and contemporary issues. When we look at the syllabus for the previous CLAT PG exams, we will see that jurisprudence used to account for almost 1/3 of the overall marks for the exam. Whereas for 2019, jurisprudence has been briefly mentioned along with the other law topics in the syllabus for the objective part. Now, does this mean that jurisprudence has been demoted, it is not important anymore? Absolutely not. Jurisprudence continues to be extremely important. It is just that jurisprudence has now probably been shifted from the objective part to the subjective part. So the questions in the subjective part might be derived from jurisprudence based topics. When it comes to contemporary legal issues, these are essentially the Supreme Court judgments, the recent constitutional amendments, and any other legal discussions or debates which are happening in the society at large at least 2 months ahead of the exam. This is because the CLAT PG papers are finalized at least 2 months ahead of the exam, so you should be aware of anything that is happening in the society at least 2 months ahead of the date of the exam. And when you read any articles or notes about contemporary legal issues, you should be aware of both the sides of the debate. You might or might not agree with one of the sides, but you should be aware of both the sides. For example, the government introduced a legislation guaranteeing 10% reservation for the economically weaker sections. Now, you might or might not agree with this. You might question the constitutional validity of such a reservation. However, you should be aware of both sides of the debate. Similarly, when it comes to the Sabarimala issue, you might or might not agree whether the Supreme Court should be interfering in religious matters. However, you should be prepared to argue on both sides of this discussion. When it comes to the pattern of the questions, since we see that the questions can be derived from jurisprudence areas or contemporary legal issues, we expect that there will be 2 questions and each of them might have a choice between a jurisprudence based question and a general legal topic based question. So in short, you should be prepared for the important topics from jurisprudence and also be aware of the recent important contemporary legal issues. So as a part of the online practice pack, we have summarized the various jurisprudence topics which you should read upon, and we have also included an overview of the various schools of jurisprudence and the personalities who are associated with each of these schools. And you should read and reread these documents multiple times till you are aware of all the points that you should be using in your subjective answers. Just practice, practice and practice, and that is the secret to preparing for the subjective part of the CLAT PG exam. Now, irrespective of the topic, there are some ground rules to writing standard essays, and these ground rules and guidelines are something that we will mention as part of our online practice pack. Now, practice writing essays irrespective of the topic. What you can do is look at the subjective questions from the previous question papers and use them as the starting point for your practice. When it comes to contemporary legal issues, before you start writing, you should read some good legal articles and editorials. We specifically recommend the Hindu newspaper because the editorial section of this newspaper tends to be well written, well structured, and they cover both sides of any debate. So read the editorial section of the Hindu newspaper regularly. You can read it offline or it is also available on their website online. Time management is going to be a very important factor that is going to contribute to your success in the CLAT PG exam. Now, the total time for the entire exam has not changed. It continues to be 2 hours. And within these 2 hours, you have to answer 100 multiple choice questions and have enough time left over to write the answers to 2 subjective questions which are worth 25 marks each. As part of the online practice pack, you have access to 50 full-length mock tests. And these mock tests can be repeated as many times as you wish. These mock tests are generated automatically by the system from a database of almost 9,500 questions. So every time you attempt a mock test, the questions will keep getting changed, and even the answer choices for any repeated questions keep getting shuffled for better practice. So repeat these mock tests as many times as possible, but aim at completing the objective part within 60 to 75 minutes max, because you should have at least 45 minutes left over for taking care of the subjective part. Immediately after you finish the objective part, you should start writing at least 2 essays to practice for the subjective part. You can use any 2 questions from the previous question papers, or you can pick any general law related topic or contemporary legal issue and write an essay on it. The objective is to become accustomed and comfortable with completing the objective part within 75 minutes and completing the subjective part within 45 minutes. So practice as frequently as possible, and remember, time management is going to be the key aspect that will define your success in this exam. Before you start answering any subjective question, you should understand the question first, and you should pay attention to the action word that is mentioned in the question itself. The action word can be anything like define, criticize, compare, contrast, comment. These action words are very important because they are setting the direction for your answer. They are mentioning what is expected from you in your answer. Therefore, you should be aware of all these important action words and what is expected from you when you come across any of them. What we have done is compiled a list of all the frequently used action words and what is the meaning of each of these words, and we have published that as part of our online practice pack. So go through the list, become aware of what is expected from you, and then start practicing your answers accordingly. For example, if a question asks you to define something, the expectation is totally different from a question that is asking you to justify a statement. A question which asks you to criticize is essentially asking you to evaluate both sides of an argument, and this would be different from a question which is asking you to justify or define something. Therefore, your answer will have to be based on what the action word wants you to do. Therefore, go through the list, understand what is expected, and then practice writing your essays accordingly. Think before you write. This may sound like a very cliched statement, but this is very important when it comes to writing essay type answers on paper. Now these days, most of our writing tends to get done on electronic devices. It might be a mobile, or it might be a laptop or a tablet, where we have the luxury of using the backspace, the delete, the copy, or the cut paste functions. So we can start putting our thoughts onto the screen even as they occur, and subsequently we can spend time in moving around the sentences and polishing the essay till we are satisfied with the final version. But when it comes to writing on paper, you have to compose the essay in your mind first, even before your pen touches the paper. The idea is to avoid corrections, strike-offs, or overwriting to the maximum possible extent. Now, a technique that you can use to compose the essay in your mind is something called a blueprinting technique. A blueprint is similar to what an architect does, wherein he creates a plan for a house even before the foundation is dug up. So similarly, when you are given an objective, that is a essay type question, and you are also given a paper, which is the space into which you have to fit the essay. So mark out a blueprint on the paper itself. Decide, this is the space that I will use for my introduction. This is the space that I will use for my main argument, space for the counter argument, and space for the conclusion. So that way you can define the space that you will use for each part of the essay, and then you can start framing the sentences that will go into each of these spaces. That way you can compose the essay in your mind to a large extent before you start writing. The only way that you can perfect this technique is through relentless practice, repetitive practice. So what we recommend, as we have been recommending multiple times in this video, is that you should use the questions from the previous question paper and just practice writing as many essays as possible using the blueprinting technique, so that you will be able to think before you write. How many pages should I write? Now this is a very frequently asked question, and officially there is no indication of any prescribed length of the answer for the subjective questions. However, we can take into consideration some of the other factors that we are aware of to arrive at a fairly good answer for this question. As we discussed earlier on, you should be able to allocate at least 45 minutes for the subjective part. Consider how many pages will you be able to write within these 45 minutes. You should be able to write at least 6 to 7 pages within this time slot. Therefore, the answer for each question will be around 3 to 4 pages long. We read somewhere that a student seems to have done the analysis that if 5 marks are awarded for each page, then the answer for a 25 mark question should be around 5 pages long. We disagree with this analysis because 5 pages of a poorly written answer will fetch less marks than 3 to 4 pages of a well written answer. The examiner can easily make out that the candidate is just trying to fill pages and has written a lot of irrelevant or repetitive stuff just for the sake of meeting those 5 pages limit. Since there is no prescribed limit, stick to 3 to 4 pages max. Make sure that you spend time in fine-tuning your essay and keeping it as relevant and focused and clear as possible, and that will fetch you more marks than a longer essay which has not been well thought of. Now, as far as the number of pages that will be given, looking at other standardized exams, we see that you will be given a standard booklet of maybe around 10 to 15 pages, which you will be using to write the answers for the subjective part. So there is no need for you to try to fill the entire booklet. 3 to 4 pages is the ideal limit that you should stick to while writing the answers for the subjective part. However, as we discussed in the previous slides, you should ensure that you meet the minimum requirement in terms of the essay and you follow the standard practices to make sure that you are writing a standard essay irrespective of who's reading it. Pay attention to the optics. Now, optics refers to all the visual factors that can create a positive or negative impression in the mind of the examiner. Even before the examiner reads your essays in detail, factors such as neat presentation, legible handwriting, good usage of spacing and punctuation, and minimizing the number of strike-offs, corrections and overwriting can create a positive impression in terms of how confident the writer of the essay is and that the essay has been well thought of and pre-planned before being committed to paper. Therefore, the only way you can achieve this is through repetitive practice. Use the questions from the previous question paper and also practice writing essays on contemporary legal issues, keeping in mind all these optical factors. Now, you might say that I'm too old now to change my handwriting. We are not asking you to change your handwriting. We are trying to keep it legible. Keep it as neat as possible, and repetitive practice will help you craft a neat looking essay. Therefore, practice as many times as possible, paying attention to the optical factors. Let's talk about self-assessment of essays. Before that, as we mentioned earlier on, there are a lot of variables and factors at play when it comes to assessment of essays. The number of ways in which an essay can be evaluated will probably be equal to the number of examiners who are reading that essay. So 50% of the essay is what you write and 50% is what the examiner reads and understands from it. So do not worry about how your essay will be evaluated. Practice writing essays that meet the common minimum requirements irrespective of who is reading it. So go through the standard techniques and the best practices that we will be listing out on the Lawment online practice pack, and ensure that you practice writing essays which meet the basic requirements for everybody, because you cannot predict how the examiner will react to your essay. Now, how do you do a self-assessment of your essay? Write an essay and let it rest for 3 days. When you read it on the 4th day, you will normally have a feeling of how could you have done it better. You will come across areas where you could have included more relevant or more number of examples. You will come across areas where you could have phrased it better. You will come across areas which you could have probably totally excluded. Therefore, when you reread the essay, rewrite it, taking into consideration all the factors that you inferred. When you practice writing an essay on the same subject at least thrice, your essay becomes more and more polished, and you will also get a sense of how to craft your essay in a better way in the first attempt itself. Therefore, practice writing essays using the questions that are there on the online practice pack. Use the best practices and techniques to write a standard essay that meets the common minimum requirement for all examiners. When you are writing an essay for the CLAT PG 2019, think from the evaluator's perspective. There will be around 5,000 candidates who will appear for the CLAT PG exam, which means that there will be around 10,000 essays which will have to be evaluated. Now, how many evaluators can be on the evaluation panel? We estimate that there could be around 50 evaluators who will be called in, which means that each evaluator will have to assess at least 100 papers, which equates to 200 essays that he or she will have to read and assess. Therefore, the evaluator will have just a few minutes to scan through your essay. You have to make an impression within the first paragraph. You have to grab the attention of the evaluator, or you have to make sure that you leave a positive impression within the first paragraph. You have to show that there is a structure and a logic throughout the essay. Even if you are using very basic words, basic sentences, basic examples, you have to show that there is a logical flow for the essay in total. You should use relevant examples wherever required and draw attention to them, because that shows that you have understood the subject and you can relate the theory to something which is relevant in the practical world. Ensure that the essay clearly covers all the aspects mentioned in the question. And this goes back to the slide where we discussed the action words. So understand the action words, go through the list of action words that are listed on the online practice pack, and get a sense of what is expected from you in your answer, and ensure that your essay clearly covers all the aspects. When the essay is ending, the evaluator should get a brief overview of what all has been covered in the essay. So this is essentially the conclusion. So if the evaluator gets a quick recap, then he or she will be in a better position to award higher marks for the essay in total, rather than having to glance through it again. Therefore, craft a brief conclusion which recaps the entire essay. And remember that a high quality but moderate quantity essay is better than a low quality high quantity essay. So which means that if your essay is 3 to 4 pages but well written, you will achieve more marks than a 5 or 6 page essay which is poorly written. Therefore, do not worry about the overall length, focus on the quality of the essay. To summarize, practice, practice and practice is going to be the key to your success in the CLAT PG 2019 exam. For the objective part, you have access to all the previous question papers from 2009 onwards, 50 full-length mock tests and 50 mini mock tests as part of the online practice pack. Since these mock tests are automatically generated by the system from a database of almost 9,500 questions, with each attempt you will see different questions, and even the answer choices to any repeated questions are shuffled for better practice. Therefore, you can practice these mock tests multiple times. For the subjective part, we have listed down the essay type questions from the previous CLAT PG papers and ILAT PG question papers. Apart from this, you should be aware of any contemporary legal issues that have been in the news ahead of the exam. Since the CLAT PG question paper is likely to be finalized at least 2 months ahead of the exam, you should be aware of any issues that have been in the news at least up to that period. Time management is going to be crucial. You have to practice the mock test in such a way that you are able to complete the objective part within 75 minutes and allocate at least 45 minutes for the subjective part. And even within this 45 minutes, you should be able to write at least 6 to 7 pages of essay type answers. Therefore, practice with the mock test as many times as possible, keeping an eye on the clock. Don't worry about the topic. Irrespective of the topic, there are some standard techniques and guidelines that you can use to ensure that you write a standard essay. Your objective is not to write an ideal essay because the concept of an ideal essay differs from person to person. Now, a standard essay will include all the factors which are required to meet the common minimum requirements irrespective of the topic and irrespective of who's reading the essay. Therefore, don't worry about the topic. Practice writing standard essays irrespective of the topic. Understand the question first. When you read the question, pay attention to the action word. The action word will determine the direction in which your essay should be focused. We have listed down all the frequently used action words as part of the online practice pack. Go through the list and understand what each one of those words means and what is expected from you when you come across that word in the question. A question which asks you to describe requires a different answer as compared to a question which asks you to debate. A question which asks you to enumerate requires a different answer as compared to a question which asks you to explain. Therefore, go through the list of action words, understand what they mean so that you can write an appropriate answer for the subjective questions. Think before you write. You should not start writing as soon as you see the question paper and the answer sheet. Spend at least 5 minutes in composing the essay in your mind. Remember the blueprinting technique that we discussed about earlier. Look at the amount of space that is available and practice planning the essay in such a way that the distinct parts of the essay fit into the available space and you have a fair idea as to what is it that you will put into each of these distinctive parts. The objective is to write a high quality but a moderate quantity essay. An unnecessarily lengthy essay will not fetch higher marks than a short, sweet but a well written essay. Therefore, aim at writing a high quality but a moderate quantity essay which is of around 3 to 4 pages in length. Think from the evaluator's perspective. The evaluator will have a limited amount of time to read, understand and award marks for each essay. Therefore, aim at making a good impression within the first paragraph of the essay. Show that there is a logical structure and a flow throughout your essay and ensure that there is a conclusion which summarizes whatever has been mentioned in the entire essay so that the evaluator can get a quick recap and award marks for the entire essay without having to go back. Write in your own style. The objective is to show that you are able to understand the question, compose your thoughts and convey your thoughts on a piece of paper in a logical and a lucid manner. And the objective is not to show that you can memorize somebody else's writing and repeat it on a piece of paper. So write in your own style. read good articles and editorials on contemporary legal issues, especially those articles which will cover both the sides of an argument. What we have seen is that the Hindu newspaper tends to have well-written editorials which have a balanced view and cover both the aspects of the argument. Therefore, ensure that you regularly read this newspaper and pay attention to how the writer is presenting a balanced view of any subject or topic. Remember, there are no right or wrong answers. The idea is to keep practicing writing essay type answers so that you are able to convey your thoughts in a rational manner. A quick recap of all the resources that are included in the Lawment Online Practice Pack. You have access to the previous CLAT PG LLM question papers from 2009 till 2018 with the official answer keys. The mock tests are updated as per the latest syllabus. There are 50 full-length mock tests and 50 mini mock tests which can be attempted unlimited number of times. And since these mock tests are automatically generated by the system, you will see different questions and even the answer choices are shuffled with every attempt. For the subjective part, we have listed down the questions from the previous CLAT PG and ILAT PG question papers. We have also included standard guidelines on how to write essays, and there is also a list of action words and their meanings so that you can understand what is expected from you in the essay type answers. There is also a summarized overview of the important topics of jurisprudence, covering all the schools of jurisprudence and the important personalities associated with each of these schools. There is also an overview of the constitutional amendments till date. If you are a new user, you can register and try the free full-length demo mock test before deciding to buy. All the tests and papers are timed and have negative marking for realistic simulation. All the tests can be taken unlimited number of times for a period of 1 year from the date of purchase. The platform is accessible via smartphone browsers, desktops and tablets, and the system is now hosted on the Google Cloud platform for faster access at all times. If you have any questions, comments or feedback, please feel free to write to us at hello@lawment.com and we will revert to you as soon as possible.